462 fans packed into the Station Nightclub. They're there to see the band Great White play their 17th show on the Play On tour. Jack Russell, the lead singer, took the stage at 11:07 p.m., and this initiated a cascade of events, all coordinated down to the second. In all of the stops of this tour, they've been experimenting with ways to amp up their performances. A few small devices, called gerbs, were an inexpensive way to add drama with a pyrotechnic display. 13 seconds after Russell stepped in front of the crowd, right on cue, the gerbs went off, shooting their stream of sparks. Only minutes later, the building was gone, completely burned to the ground. The fire claimed 100 lives, and it injured hundreds more. And even more painful for survivors is the fact that this disaster could have been prevented. The building had known flaws, and if these were addressed, they would have saved lives and grief. An exhaustive investigation of the tragedy led to sweeping changes in performance venue laws and the construction practices that continue to shape our buildings today. So what exactly happened? The Station Nightclub, located in West Warwick, Rhode Island, was originally built in 1946 as a gin mill. It followed common construction practices of its era: wood framing, wood-paneled walls on the interior, and a mansard-style wood-shingled roof. In the year 2000, Michael and Jeff Derderian purchased the building to convert it into a live music venue. The transformation required only minimal work on their part, just adding a raised stage area and a dance floor. They added pool tables to the sunroom, but then the rest of the areas were mostly unchanged, including the bar and the back of house spaces like the restrooms and then the office. The new owners consulted the codes to make sure that their new nightclub would conform to the relevant safety laws. According to codes like IBC or the International Building Code, the 4,500 square foot building could safely hold just over 200 people when operating as a bar. But during a performance, that capacity nearly doubles to around 420 people. That's because nightclubs are considered assembly structures, like a theater is. The assumption is that everyone will sit or stand and they'll be closer together while viewing the performance. But even though assembly structures can hold double the amount of people by law, it certainly does not mean that this one was twice as safe. In fact, because the building was older, its code compliance was grandfathered in, meaning it didn't have to conform to the stricter modern rules for assembly structures. That's despite the fact that the structure was never designed for the type of large crowds and the high energy events that it began hosting. But the way that grandfathering works, as long as the Derderians didn't make anything worse, they were allowed to cram 420 people into this outdated wooden structure. In late 2002, Daniel Beachley, Great White's tour manager, called the Derderians to coordinate the logistics of that February show. Everything that he proposed seemed fine to the Derderians, except for the pyrotechnic display that he was pitching for the entrance of the band. The Derderians, they had an already strained relationship with the local fire marshal, who kept finding new problems every time that he came in to inspect their building. Just a few months ago, he wrote them up for improperly installed door, and before that, for using foam on the walls. The foam was meant to improve the venue's acoustics by dampening the harsh sounds played by the bands, but it was also made of polyurethane, a highly flammable, petroleum-based material. It was installed all around the stage and the dance floor. The Derderians didn't want to risk getting shut down, so they told Beachley he could move forward with the rest of the show, but no pyrotechnics. Unfortunately, Beachley did not listen. Before the performance, a stagehand installed 4 gerbs in the usual location and orientation. 2 of them vertical, and 2 set at 45-degree angles, away from center stage, but toward the walls. The ridges of the foam usually help suppress acoustic reflections, but here they trap the sparks within the porous material. 10 seconds after ignition of the gerbs, the foam caught fire, and 9 seconds later, the flames reached the flammable acoustic ceiling tiles. The band, who was unaware of the fire, kept on playing, and their lack of reaction made the crowd believe that the flaming walls were just part of the show. And this went on for 30 seconds, an eternity in this context. In this particular building, occupants only had 90 seconds to exit once the flames were ignited. That's how long the space inside would remain survivable, or as officials call it, tenable. A space becomes untenable if one of these 3 factors is true. If it reaches 120 degrees Celsius or 250 degrees Fahrenheit, if it reaches a density of heat energy that's akin to a blast furnace, and finally, if oxygen levels drop below 12% of the air, normal levels are 21%. Following the band's lead, people only began searching for exits at the 30-second mark. Of the 4 options for exits, not all of them were viable. One exit was for employees only. It was located behind a series of internal doors, and only 12 people escaped through it. Most people were gathered near the dance in the sunroom area when the fire began, and they had two choices: the main entrance or the door next to the stage. Ideally, at least half of them would be exiting through that stage door, but survivors reported a bouncer was actually turning them away when the fire started. The door itself was also a problem. It was faulty. It's the one that was cited by the fire marshal. It was covered by another door that faced inwards, and it was covered in all of that flammable foam. So it was consumed in flames 60 seconds into the incident, and only 20 people escaped through that door. If those people decided instead to head to the main entrance, it was hardly better. Patrons from the bar and the dart room area were converging here too. Around 275 people first attempted to go through this way. But this way also required funneling through a series of narrow, single-width doorways. After 60 seconds, these were fully blocked with a phenomenon called crowd crush. Only the first 90 people made it out through the front doors. Once the front door was blocked, people began turning around, looking for alternative routes. But because everything was filled with smoke and couldn't see, it wasn't obvious which paths could lead to viable exits or which ones wouldn't. Some paths ended in places like an office with barred windows, so absolutely no way out. However, toward the parking lot, 2 windows opened up and provided a safe exit for 54 and 24 people respectively. Those windows were not obvious options at first, but they became a particularly effective exit solution. Meanwhile, only 54 people escaped through the specially designed emergency door that was in the bar area. During the chaos, this option, it only occurred to the regulars that were already more familiar with the building than the average person. At the same time, the main entrance only had a 40% success rate. That is all really strange. So what exactly and who are really to blame here? Officials reconstructed the events using survivor testimony, recovered video that is difficult to watch, and forensic analysis of the scene itself. Some individuals, like the building owner and the band's tour manager, they were tried in court and ended up going to jail. But it wasn't just the individuals who failed. The system that ensures buildings are safe to occupy, and this building itself failed too. The National Institute of Standards and Technology, or NIST, reconstructed 20% of the building, and they ran a series of simulations on it. In their control test, NIST recreated existing conditions. The foam, as expected, was never an acceptable material to be on the walls. The result was that 20% of that building became untenable in just 71 seconds. Disturbingly, there was no nearby fire extinguishers in that entire half of the building. And of course, there were no sprinklers. But would sprinklers have even helped if they were there? To know that, they ran a simulation again, this time with a typical sprinkler system installed. And in the test, a normal sprinkler system would have been flowing at full capacity within 30 seconds of the flames starting. So even before people started heading for the exits. And the sprinklers would have been so effective, none of the building would have ever become untenable. So that's the first failure of the building. It failed to prevent the fire from spreading. But what about those exits? They just were not as effective as we'd expect them to be either. People tend to follow routes that they're familiar with, even if it's not the best option. This phenomena is known as herding behavior, and it led to the more familiar route becoming overwhelmed when viable alternatives were still available. NIST also created digital simulations to study this, and they found that simply removing the single-width opening before the main entrance allowed the building to be evacuated in 150 seconds more quickly, enough to save many, many more lives. Even before NIST was able to publish their findings, people were ready to institute the changes that might prevent another tragedy happening like this. The National Fire Protection Association, or NFPA, issued a set of emergency alterations and addendums to their existing fire codes. Of course, it included banning all indoor pyrotechnic displays, but the most significant was the closing of the loophole on sprinklers. Older wooden structures now require sprinklers without exception. All assembly buildings, regardless of age, must have them. Also, every venue with an assembly occupancy must now have a trained crowd manager on site, one for every 250 people. That means the station would have had at least 2. Crowd managers are trained to develop emergency plans, identify any possible hazards, and to control crowds during a disaster. The new codes also gave fire marshals much more authority to deny events if they fail a life safety inspection, and they are able to institute large fines for failure to comply. No more toothless citations like happened at the station. Rhode Island adopted those new codes immediately, and then the other states quickly followed. But once NIST finished their study, it revealed another, even larger problem with the process of how codes are determined in the first place. It wasn't just the foam, it wasn't just the doors, or the lack of sprinklers. It was a systematic failure to use modern technology to be able to anticipate human behavior in emergencies. NIST's recommendation was to integrate crowd simulations and fire modeling into the building codes, and this represents a major shift. By embracing computer simulations, experts could visualize disaster scenarios before they even happen, something that was completely unimaginable just a few years before that. These simulations now allow us to predict just how a building will react to fire, but also how people will react too. By modeling panic and confusion and the exit routes, we're able to fine-tune safety systems to meet the real-world challenges. Today, there's a memorial where the nightclub once stood. But beyond the memorial, these sweeping changes that followed, they're another legacy of the event. The fire codes have improved, but so has our understanding of how people behave in emergencies. This fire didn't just change the laws, it changed the way that we think about public safety and our responsibility to prevent disasters like this. Safety measures, they cannot be static and still remain effective. They have to evolve continuously, and in some ways, fire codes can only ever really advance in response to tragedies like this. Studying these uncovers what and who to blame, but hopefully it also points towards opportunities for improvement. Today's systems are proactive and work in real time using cameras to offer immediate suggestions for guiding people to safety during an event. We've come a long way since 2003, but we owe it to the victims of tragedies like this to keep pushing for better safety in every venue and in every building. Part of doing that is just to continue telling the stories about victims, the survivors, and the lessons that can drive change. I'm personally incredibly grateful for the ability to share these narratives and for the resources that help me to do it more effectively. One of those is this video's sponsor, Skillshare. Skillshare has been an incredible resource for improving my writing. It's the largest online learning community for any creative person by offering thousands of classes across all kinds of categories like creative writing, film, illustration, design, productivity, and so much more. One Skillshare class that really resonated with me is the Creative Writing Bootcamp by author Mila Goldberg. Her class is designed to help you become an idea generation machine, and it guides you through inventive exercises that unlock your creativity. Maya's overall energetic style and the practical prompts have helped me to find ways to convey stories that matter, like the one you just watched. What I love about Skillshare is their learning by doing approach. After each class, you can create and share projects and get feedback from a community of creatives that are on a similar journey as you. It's inspiring to be part of such a supportive group, and I'm grateful for the connections that I've made there. Whether you're looking to enhance your storytelling abilities, or dive into graphic design, or explore photography, or just boost your creativity, Skillshare has something for everyone. It's designed by creatives for creatives, and it's a fantastic way to turn your passion into skills that can make a real difference. The first 500 people to use my link in the description will receive a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. So get started today and unlock your creative potential. See you over there, and as always, thanks for watching.